Welcome to the Secular Scriptures. I'm Gail. This reading and discussion is Genesis chapter 37 from the World English Bible, a free public domain translation of the Bible, without which this study would not be possible. It's worth stumbling around in some fields to find the history, literary analysis, comparative mythology, and conflicts, contradictions, and controversies. Plus, there's more goat trickery. Simply must stay for the tricky goats. These poor goats. This is a secular Bible study, so please refrain from soaking any rainbow robes with the goat's blood of apologetics. I am not a biblical scholar, I just love these stories. So grab your favorite beverage from the Ishmaelites or Midianites, and let's read about how little Joe ends up in Egypt. Genesis chapter 37. Jacob lived in the land of his father's travels, in the land of Canaan. This is the history of the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. Joseph brought an evil report of them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a tunic of many colors. His brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, and they hated him and couldn't speak peaceably to him. The children are fighting. Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Please hear this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright, and behold, your sheaves came around and bowed down to my sheaf." His brothers asked him, "Will you indeed reign over us? Will you indeed have dominion over us?" They hated him all the more for his dreams and for his words. He dreamed yet another dream, and told it to his brothers, and said, "Behold, I have dreamed yet another dream, and behold, the sun and the moon and 11 stars bowed down to me." He told it to his father and to his brothers. His father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Will I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves down to the earth before you?" His brothers envied him, but his father kept this saying in mind. His brothers went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. Israel said to Joseph, "Aren't your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send you to them." He said to him, "Here I am." He said to him, "Go now, see whether it is well with your brothers, and well with the flock, and bring me word again." So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. A certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. The man asked him, "What are you looking for?" He said, "I'm looking for my brothers. Tell me, please, where are they feeding the flock?" The man said, "They have left here, for I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. They saw him afar off, and before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him. That escalated quickly. They said to one another, "Behold, the dreamer comes. Come now, therefore, and let's kill him, and cast him into one of the pits, and we will say, 'An evil animal has devoured him.' We will see what will become of his dreams." Reuben heard it, and delivered him out of their hand, and said, "Let's not take his life." Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood, throw him into the pit that is in the wilderness, but lay no hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hand to restore him to his father." When Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of many colors that was on him, and they took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty, there was no water in it. They sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother to conceal his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites, and not let our hand be on him, for he is our brother, our flesh." His brothers listened to him. The Midianites, who were merchants, passed by, and they drew and lifted Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. The merchants brought Joseph into Egypt. Reuben returned to the pit, and saw that Joseph wasn't in the pit, and he tore his clothes. He returned to his brothers, and said, "The child is no more, and where will I go?" They took Joseph's tunic, and killed a male goat, and dipped the tunic in the blood. They took the tunic of many colors, and they brought it to their father, and said, "We have found this. Examine it now, and see if it is your son's tunic or not." He recognized it, and said, "It is my son's tunic. An evil animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces." Jacob tore his clothes, and put sackcloth on his waist, and mourned for his son for many days. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. He said, "For I will go down to Sheol to my son mourning." his father wept for him. The Midianites sold him into Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's, the captain of the guard. Aww, brotherly love. It's so beautiful. Okay, history of the text. As with most of Genesis, chapter 37 is a healthy mix of the Yahwist and Elohist sources, uniting the southern and northern traditions into one narrative. The Yahwist source was writing in the 10th to 9th century BCE in the southern kingdom, and the Elohist was writing in the 8th century BCE in the northern kingdom. Literary analysis. Characters. We have Jacob/Israel and Joseph, who is 17 years old, in speaking roles. We have their flocks, the brothers, Bilhah and Zilpah's sons, meaning Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher specifically. A man in the field of Shechem in a speaking role. Maybe Simeon and Levi didn't kill all of the Shechemites, perhaps. Reuben in a speaking role. The Ishmaelites and Midianites. A goat, Jacob's sons and daughters, and Potiphar, who are not in speaking roles per se. Setting, when and where. This is a bit of a question here. Sometime between 1900 and 1600 BCE. Without worrying about real-world time frames, the story takes place after the death of Rachel when Joseph is 17 and Jacob/Israel is 120, but verse 10 implies that Rachel may still be alive unless your mother refers to Leah, Zilpah, or Bilhah, which is possible. Because these stories are compiled from different sources, this is just a slight oddity that sticks out as a question mark. Chapter 37 spans a wide geographic range from Hebron to Shechem to Dothan to Lower Egypt, where Joseph is taken. And just as a note, Lower Egypt means the northern end of Egypt because the Nile flows north. Just so you know. Point of view and style. As with most of the Yahwist and Elohist sources, this is told in the prose narrative style from the third-person omniscient point of view. It gives us the feelings and motivations of Jacob/Israel, Reuben, and all of the brothers. Plot summary. Dad named Jacob, now Israel, is living it up in Canaan with his brood of brats who can't stop fighting. And since no one likes a tattletale, the older boys have it out for little Joe. When he keeps having dreams that he's better than them, feathers get ruffled and there's a kerfuffle, which ends with them throwing him in a dry well. Some opportunistic capitalists come wandering along and pluck the kid out like a prize trout to sell in Egypt. Finding little Joe missing, the brothers freak out and turn to family tradition by killing a goat, tricking their father into thinking his favorite kid is in Sheol, which makes him cry and wish to die, but Joe's really in Egypt. Literary devices. First, we have foreshadowing, taking the form of recurring dreams or prophetic dreams. Now, Joseph is particularly known for interpreting his prophetic dreams. Joseph dreams that his symbolic family will bow down to him, which would be contrary to the birth order and status of his culture. Since status was critically important, disrupting this order was fightin' words. Not that these boys needed very much to fight. But we also have to consider that within this blessed line, it is rarely the firstborn that carries the divine blessing. Chiasm. Like the story of the sacrifice of Isaac, this narrative of Joseph being sold into slavery has an ABCDCBA structure. A. Jacob Israel loves Joseph, and the coat symbolizes this affection. B. Joseph goes out to the field to check on his brothers to see if they are causing mischief. C. Reuben talks his brothers out of killing Joseph. D. His brothers put Joseph in the pit and he's taken as a slave. Now we go back to C with Reuben discovering that Joseph is gone and he tears his clothing in grief over him being dead because he wanted to save him. B. Joseph's brothers return from the field having done him mischief. And then A. Jacob/Israel mourns Joseph, the coat symbolizing death. We have a recurring theme. The brothers use a dead goat to deceive their father about Joseph's death. Joseph deceived Laban with sheep and goat genetics, and Rebekah used goats to fool Isaac into giving Jacob Esau's blessing. We have 3 generations of goat deception. I'm actually delighted by this. Comparative mythology. I hate to just give you 2 brief summaries here, but I like how each of these align with the Joseph narrative in different ways. The bird nester myth from the Amazon is about family jealousy where a father abandons his son on a high cliff. The son is rescued by a jaguar, and brings fire to his people, becoming a great cultural leader. It is a birth of civilization story, much like we see later in Joseph's tale. Cinderella shares the loving father, the jealous siblings, imprisonment, and an emphasis on special clothing with literal rags to riches, where the protagonist gains power over their abusive family, and in some versions is very compassionate, and in others not so much. Conflicts, contradictions, and controversies. Conflicting information with society. Slavery is wrong. Why doesn't the Bible say slavery is wrong? Because it was written by people who thought that slavery was fine and it has nothing to do with the divine. Contradictions in the text. Ishmaelites versus Midianites. Genesis chapter 37 toggles between the Ishmaelites and the Midianites in a confusing way. There is a text-critical possibility and a few in-text interpolations possible, i.e. apologetics. Since this, like most of Genesis, is a cut-and-paste story uniting the northern and southern traditions of the Yahwist and Elohist sources, the very sensible literary explanation is that one tradition says that it was the Ishmaelites and the other says it was the Midianites. And when the two stories were combined, as is so often the case, it was more important to preserve the traditions than to have a consistent plot. Joseph's dream and being saved by the Midianites from the dry well belong to the Yahwist source, and the Elohist is responsible for the Technicolor dream coat, the colorful coat, and the Ishmaelites. On a personal note, noticing this discrepancy as a child and bringing it up to my pastor was a big problem that got me yelled at and told to stop questioning God. I really wish I'd grown up in a time and place where blind obedience was not the name of the game, but alas, here I am, learning about ancient Jewish literature and having hot flashes, resolving childhood traumas that should never have happened with a basic third-grade reading level and a halfway competent minister. Oh well, back to the story. The first common in-text resolution is that the Ishmaelites and Midianites were traveling together. Now, it doesn't say that, but this falls into not impossible. The second is that the Ishmaelites passed by and gave the brothers the idea to sell Joseph, and while they were munching on lunch, the Midianites come along and pull Joseph out of the dry well, and later sold him to the Ishmaelites, who then pass him back to the Midianites for some reason, who then sold him in Egypt. No money goes to the brothers, just a missing Joseph when Reuben gets back. Now, I don't actually disapprove of this interpretation, as it doesn't contradict the text itself up to this point, but later verses will make it clear that the they in they pulled him out were his brothers, not the Midianites. So just let that scenario go poof, okay? Because it doesn't work out later on. Number 3, the Ishmaelites and Midianites were the same people, which is what I was told, and this is just silly and it contradicts earlier parts of the text. See the family tree. The Ishmaelites were descendants of Ishmael, Abraham's eldest son by Hagar, and the Midianites were descendants of Abraham via his marriage to Keturah after Sarah's death, and their fourth son, Midian. So in the story, this people group is indeed related to each other to the same degree that they are related to Joseph and his brothers, by the way. But they are not the same people group. There is a grand tradition of linking the people groups as close allies in terms of trade, military alliance, and region. So do whatever you want with those 3 scenarios. Contradictions with history! Camels! We need to talk about camels. I love camels from far away in artwork. Close up, I'm kind of like, oh hells no. If you've ever seen a camel, they are huge. These creatures are gigantic. Okay. Anyway, so domesticated camels didn't arrive in the Levant until around 930 BCE. They were literally not there during the time that this story happens. Like, cue the sad trombone, right? Do you want to know when they were there? They were there when the story was written. I mean, it makes me sad to think that Rebecca didn't just hop on her camel and ride off into the sunset to meet Isaac so they could shack up in his tent, but alas. And Rachel hiding some miniature gods in the camel saddle is unfortunately just a story. But there is also a wee bit of truth here too, which is kind of exciting. It's just not the right time frame. In one of my other videos, which may or may not be out by the time you are seeing this, I talk about how the Exodus didn't actually happen, but there is a cultural memory of when Egypt did control Canaan, and sticking it to the Egyptians becomes a point of pride that survives in the cultural memory. Israel as a nation doesn't emerge out of the wider Canaanite population until after the Bronze Age collapse around the 1200s BCE, long after this story takes place, and right after Egypt was ousted from the region. So the narrative of slavery in Egypt isn't necessarily about the nation of Israel going to and coming out of Egypt. It's about being subjugated by Egypt in their own lands and then the fight for liberation. But they had to make it fit the narrative of the time, and hence the Exodus story. And I'm sorry to skip ahead yet again, there may actually be a connection to the Hyksos rule in Egypt, which was 1650 to 1550 BCE, which isn't quite where Joseph is in the timeline. Like, he's actually a little bit early for that, but it's not that far off either. And we'll talk more about that when we get back to Joseph in a few weeks. We have to get through Tamar first. Channel recommendations. Again, I'll recommend FPC Spirit Lake. They have an excellent series on these particular chapters. Joel Reed's Bible for a very humorous take. There may be show tunes, just saying. Skepticus, delightful, snarky commentary. Questions. I only have one. Why were Jacob's sons such little shits? What? Is this bad parenting or bad genetics? I don't know. Thank you so much for joining me here on the Secular Scriptures. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. Did your pastor yell at you about the Ishmaelites and Midianites too? If he did, tell me in the comments below. I'll see you next week at 9 a.m.